Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Michael Anderson, the Chief Strategist for Public Sector and Informatica. Mike, thanks so much for being here.
Scott, thanks. It's great to be here as well. Appreciate the invite.
And, I wanted to ask firstly, we have a new administration, and while it's a new administration, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's all new things happening. We have an information strategy, a federal data strategy, really, that is ongoing. It's in its second year. What sort of things should the government be doing on this?
Scott, great question. And just to start off with, I think the federal data strategy aligned and interconnected with the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act that was signed officially into law in 2019. They're really mutually supporting, and I think a lot of super work has been done across the board on both the act itself and the federal data strategy and the federal data strategy's year one action plan, right? So that's a mouthful there and a lot to talk about and think about. But when you bring it all together, it really offers a super framework for the government to move forward, and they have, in creating a data-driven culture and meeting the mandates and spirit of the letter of both the act and the data strategy and its action plan. A couple focus areas I think will be key to moving forward and driving success, but I want to say as well also and give a shout out to our government leaders and our government employees that have really done a tremendous job of recovering and making sure the general operations of the government have continued amongst this ongoing COVID-19 pandemic we're in. That I bring that up because one, I don't think they've been given enough credit for all the obstacles they overtook or had to overcome in order to make sure their operations continue. Things like teleworking, making data available across the board while still maintaining security protections and cybersecurity requirements. Tremendous job by the government. It's not over yet, and there's a lot more to do. But I bring that up because I think that slowed down a bit progress on the year one action plan in general. There was an official postponement of some of the requirements and mandates in terms of the milestones and timelines of the year one action plan, and that was justifiable. But I think 2021 going beyond will be a tremendous opportunity because we've learned a lot of lessons from COVID-19 in terms of what data can do to drive good policy decisions that affect the economy and all of our lives, right? So first and foremost, great job to the government and what they've done. And now it's time to look forward to what's next. So I think there's two focus areas that are going to be pretty important moving forward and to build upon the year one action plan. Whether or not they show up in the year two action plan, when that comes out in the next month or two, I don't know. I would certainly like to see a couple of these focus areas. So number one, let's get to the topic of data governance. Now, that may seem kind of dry and boring sounding, Scott, but honestly, data governance isn't as restrictive and dry as it may seem. If you look at it as more of a liberating capability and a liberating framework for the agencies, as many of them do and may continue to do here in 2021, I think they'll realize that freedom really comes from ensuring data governance is available across agencies. It really starts at the Office of Management and Budget, which had a task essentially from the Act to make sure that they were able to apply policies, establish a common interoperability of data, to make sure that those policies could be, I hate to use the word enforced, but maybe monitored, to make sure from a protection standpoint, a data privacy standpoint, that was being taken care of, and to ensure something as simple as knowing what your data is saying and what the context of that data is. And what I'm talking about there is a data glossary, right? Or at a minimum, a common lexicon, if you will. So when the VA is talking about certain elements of data, it means the same thing to the Defense Health Agency, which is very closely related. So, governance really gets at establishing a framework that offers freedom for consumers of data to do the things they need to do to get their job done and to complete the mission of the agency. Knowing where their data is, being able to inventory it, one of the mandates in the Data Act, and cataloging that data so then it can be found, Also being able to trust that data, making sure that it is high quality data and it's complete. I think too many instances we've seen recently in the COVID crisis is the government maybe not getting, you name the government, state level, city level, US government level, not getting the necessary data in to make decisions about the COVID crisis itself, and then informing the public and making recommendations and guidelines to how to handle the crisis, right? That data has had a tough time of being made sure it's complete, it's all coming in and it makes sense and it's not duplicative, because at the end of the day, if the data isn't governed properly, that's what you're going to get, and then you're going to get bad decisions or poor uninformed decisions from our leaders based on data they think is accurate and trustworthy, but it's really not. So governance gets at the essential component of that. And governance at the level, data governance at the level the government needs really has to be automated. So automated, knowing where your data is, how it's collected, how it's cataloged, that you can trust it. Who are the owners of that data? Who's responsible for what? And then making sure it can be shared across an organization and it's trusted. And you know the lineage of that data is a key component. That to me is liberating for consumers of data. It's not really restrictive, right? Because then you don't have to spend, a consumer of data doesn't have to spend 80% of their time finding the data they want, and then 20% on actually assessing and analyzing it. You can switch that around, spend 20% finding it because it's there and you've done the work and it's been automated. And then most of your time and less time on actually trying to find it. Long answer there to begin with. I'm just going to mention one other focus area in addition to automating data governance that I think is necessary moving forward, Scott, if I may. And that's getting at, and you've heard this probably from a lot of folks on your show and in the media in general, and that's getting the appropriate budget and funding to move the federal data strategy and the year one in and two action plans forward is going to be key. A couple components of that I think will help drive additional budget, not just lobbying Congress or putting justifications into yearly budget plans, but as well developing a set of metrics. And I think OMB could take a look at this with their CDO council and their own data governance board, developing a set of metrics and scorecards, if you will, for agencies on the completion of the actions and tasks in the yearly action plans. And guess what, Scott? I think making that scorecard public will also drive all of the agencies' leadership to pay attention to that, especially important with the transition of the administration today, and also driving the need for identifying that budget requirement to really get this on steroids and move out. So those two issues I think should be focus areas moving forward. Data governance, automating those processes required and bringing freedom to data consumers to do what they need to do and share that data. And the second piece, budgeting, metrics, and maybe a scorecard throwing in there to drive those justifications for budget. Key moving forward, as is any new initiative in the government, is funding it, and that needs to be done. Scott, a little bit long-winded, but I wanted to make sure I got those 2 points in, so thanks.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the funding is always the hard part, as you were saying. You talked a lot about focusing on improving data management, but also the United States is trying to increase its technological edge as we're facing near-peer competitors, multinational corporations that are pushing new technologies out from different areas of the world. How can the United States maintain that edge?
Scott, there's several areas that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody in this world we live in with information technology that we need to significantly improve on and address across our national apparatus, if you will, especially at the federal level. Two, we won't get into too much detail here today because it's not really my lane and what we're here to talk about, but the 5G discussion, I think, is up top of priorities in order to make sure we maintain our technology edge across the globe. I think also quantum computing is up there, and that's not my background. However, if you read anything about quantum computing and the power that has to really change the paradigm, if you will, of interaction between governments and non-government organizations, the impact can be tremendous. But the third technology capability that we also need to dominate, I think, globally, so we can set the standards on, is that topic of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I focus there on that last piece, artificial intelligence, because data is such a key critical component for success in artificial intelligence. I dare say that much of the focus and attention to artificial intelligence comes down to the algorithms associated with artificial intelligence. Every day you read in the news, somebody came up with a new algorithm that's doing X, Y, or Z. That's really a neat outcome from that artificial intelligence algorithm. But I asked the question, and everybody should, how accurate is the outcome of that algorithm? The accuracy depends on the data feeding it. And when I start talking about this, I like to talk about what I call the trinity of artificial intelligence. And that trinity, imagine, if you will, a Venn diagram with artificial intelligence at the middle of it. You got another oval over here that has the cloud in it, and then you've got an oval over here that has data in it. So AI, artificial intelligence, and data all coming together in a trinity, and all three of those are important to get those outcomes you want. And how do you do that? Well, you've got to use the cloud for the large amount of data, massive amounts of data it takes to train an algorithm to actually come up with a semblance of a human level of intelligence. We're not there yet, but some type of level of intelligence that'll automate processes. And the only way to do that is to feed the algorithm massive amounts of data. You can only do that efficiently and effectively in a cloud type of environment. Otherwise, it just gets too expensive to do on-prem with the loads of storage requirements involved in it. In the data itself, it needs to be complete, it needs to be known. The lineage of it needs to be as well locked down. So as data moves from a source to an algorithm or a tool that's creating advanced analytics, you know where that data has changed, who's touched it, and how much different it is from that original authoritative source. And you need to be able to bring that data in from all types of sources, all types of databases. Some of it's unstructured, some of it's structured. You've got to be able to identify that data, know where it all is, understand it, clean it up, ensure it's complete before you even bring it into the cloud to feed those algorithms. So a platform, if you will, is going to be required to make sure that we really achieve the outcomes we want on artificial intelligence. You can't overemphasize that enough. So as our country focuses and increases funding for artificial intelligence, data's got to be right behind it. You need platforms to do all that end-to-end data plumbing, if you will, to make sure that we get the value we want and that we're going to put critical taxpayer dollars into for those artificial intelligence tools. Thanks, Scott.
And one last question before you run out of time, Michael. What can government agencies do to adopt a leapfrog technology capability when it comes to data management and make sure that they're really creating that data-driven culture that they need?
I love this question, Scott. In the year one action plan, there was action two, I believe, that recommended, OMB put in there, recommended each agency look at assessing and adopting a master data management program or a master data management capability for their agencies. I'll just say bottom line up front, I think I'd love to see in the year two action plan that recommendation for master data management, again, commonly called MDM program, is mandated. And here's why. We tend occasionally actually frequently, when you look at getting end-to-end data management capability, you focus on the little things like finding your data, discovering it, cataloging it, ensure there's a quality package wrapped around it, make sure it's governed and cataloged so you can find it. That's great, but if you iteratively create your ability to manage data that way, you're going to miss an opportunity to leapfrog, if you will, those iterative steps and head right to a master data management program, which does all those things I just mentioned, plus gives you a full 360-degree view, if you will, of a person, place, or thing. So let me take for an example, Scott, unemployment insurance and the challenges we've had within that program at the federal government, down to the states, down to the implementation level of ensuring that fraud, waste, and abuse of unemployment insurance, especially with the huge tranche with the stimulus packages, is minimized. And we reduce the risk for that fraud, waste, and abuse. We've all seen the headlines. There have been too many millions and probably close to billions of dollars wasted, and that money's going to places where it shouldn't, and to people that shouldn't be getting it, whether it's an improper payment by human error, or it's literally fraud by people taking advantage of the system. If you have an MDM program in place, you can really alleviate a lot of those problems with fraud, waste, and abuse. If Mike Anderson's a US citizen and a taxpayer, before you push the button to provide that unemployment insurance to me, we need to make sure I should be getting it. And there's other data in the government that tends to be frequently stovepipe, that's not looked at prior to and brought in prior to pushing that button and giving me an unemployment check. I'd love to have an unemployment check, right? Even though I'm employed, extra money, sure, I'll take it. But if maybe I haven't paid my taxes in 5 years and the IRS has me under investigation, maybe I haven't paid alimony. Maybe I'm a convicted criminal and I'm in the prison system. Those are just examples. All of those stovepipe pieces of data or content or data sets are there and they exist, but if you don't understand them and have a full 360-degree view of me before you give that, you may say, maybe Mike Anderson shouldn't be getting that unemployment insurance, right? Especially if I fall into one of those categories that I mentioned just as an example. So exponentially leapfrogging to that capability, bringing in that type of information, making sure that data is trusted, and I can easily, as the program manager for unemployment insurance, ensure that Mike Anderson should be getting that unemployment check before I hit send. Then it's going to save the taxpayers a lot of money, and more importantly, it's going to make sure that money that Congress is allocating in the stimulus tranches goes to the person who needs it the most. As a taxpayer, Scott, I hope you're as angry as I am when you see billions of dollars lost due to fraud, and then the billions of dollars and millions of dollars required to investigate that and try to recover it. We don't need to be doing that. Let's leapfrog to that master data management capability. And I use unemployment insurance just as an example because it's been in the news, right? You could apply it to a plethora of programs the U.S. government operates on and provides for the American citizen. So Scott, I think that helps a little bit. I think that's definitely an area where a mandate in year 2, getting to a master data management program across whatever is applicable to the particular agency's mission and their requirements and what they're doing for the U.S. citizens is key.
Certainly, and it sounds like there's a lot of opportunities for data coming up in the U.S. government. I'd like to thank today's guest. His name is Michael Anderson. He's the Chief Strategist for Public Sector at Informatica. I'm your moderator, Scott Maucione, and you're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Informatica.